Today is Wednesday, September 6th. What to know about lawmakers' to-do list as the Senate returns to Capitol Hill, and how long they have to make a deal before a government shutdown. Also, a newly formed tropical storm could be the next major hurricane to hit the U.S., what we know so far. Plus, what happened that grounded all United Airlines flights yesterday? Promising new technology that could spot autism. And more women with young kids are working now than ever before. Those stories and more news to know in today's episode. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. The U.S. Senate has wrapped up its summer recess and is now back at the nation's capital with a long to-do list. On the top of that list, keep the government functioning. Once again, lawmakers need to reach a deal to fund the government before a deadline at the end of this month. Otherwise, they face a shutdown. So senators are starting to discuss at least a short-term funding measure. But no matter what passes in the Democratic-controlled Senate, it's going to be tougher to pass in the Republican-controlled House. House lawmakers don't return from recess until next week. But already some hardline Republicans are promising to vote against even a short-term measure unless it includes some of their priorities. For example, the situation at the southern border, what they say is the weaponization of the Justice Department, and so-called woke policies at the Pentagon. But the problem is, with these issues in particular, it's going to be hard for the group of Republicans to find common ground with Dems. Plus, lawmakers do have some other business to address. For example, there's a closed-door meeting happening today about Republican leader Mitch McConnell's health. Remember, he had 2 episodes of sort of freezing up during news conferences, though the Capitol Hill doctor put out a new letter this week to say there's no evidence McConnell had a stroke or seizure and that he does not have Parkinson's disease. Meanwhile, there are also some House lawmakers who say they're ready to begin impeachment proceedings against President Biden. They say Biden was a part of foreign bribery schemes with his son, Hunter Biden. But the White House says not true, while Democrats and some Republicans in Congress say they haven't seen enough evidence to support an impeachment inquiry. So stay tuned. This week, a judge handed down the most severe penalty yet for the January 6th Capitol riot. The former leader of the Proud Boys extremist group was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Enrique Tarrio and other Proud Boys members were convicted on charges of seditious conspiracy. The others got prison terms between 10 and 17 years. But Tarrio got even longer since the judge said he was the, quote, ultimate leader of a conspiracy. Prosecutors say Tarrio summoned his men to Washington and launched them at the Capitol. And they say his leadership over the Proud Boys was all about violence and manipulation. On the other side, Tarrio's lawyers argued their client was prone to trash talk but had no intentions of actually overthrowing the government. And they say prosecutors used Tarrio as a scapegoat for former President Trump, who spoke at the Stop the Steal rally ahead of the riot. More than 1,100 other people have been charged in connection to the Capitol attack. Dozens of people protesting and rioting against a planned police and firefighter training facility are now facing some new criminal charges. They're part of what's known as the Stop Cop City effort in Georgia. They say they want to stop the militarization of police, or they have environmental concerns about it, or other worries. But their movement has, at times, veered into violence and vandalism. The state's attorney general says the 61 people charged are militant anarchists who have supported a violent movement. The latest indictment is on racketeering charges, but most of the people indicted have already been facing other charges, too, in connection to the same movement. Activists accuse the attorney general of trying to silence free speech while building a campaign for governor. But Georgia's governor is praising the indictment, saying his top priority is keeping people safe. Meanwhile, construction continues for the new training center. Oil prices have climbed to their highest level of the year this week. It's happening because of the second and third largest global oil producers, Saudi Arabia and Russia. They both announced they're going to keep their recent oil production cuts through the end of the year. And that takes about 1.3 million barrels a day off the global market. So why the cuts? Well, it mostly has to do with China, since it's the largest buyer of both Saudi and Russian oil. And its economy is struggling, so it won't need as many barrels. But it's not great for the U.S. either. Typically, American gas prices follow the price of crude oil. And right now, U.S. gas prices are already at the highest level of the year. The nationwide average is $3.81 for a gallon of regular gas. Well, there is another tropical storm churning in the Atlantic Ocean, and meteorologists expect it to turn into a dangerous major hurricane by this weekend, with winds topping 140 miles an hour. So they say anyone who lives along the East Coast, from Florida to Maine, needs to pay close attention to this one, though it could be at least another week before it really starts to impact the mainland U.S. And a lot could change between now and then. For now, Tropical Storm Lee is more than 1,300 miles east of the Caribbean islands, and the conditions are right for it to strengthen soon. But the exact track of the storm is more up in the air. Still, the National Weather Service is telling people on the East Coast to finish their general hurricane season preps if they haven't already. The Atlantic hurricane season typically lasts through the end of November. We have more news for you still coming up, but first, support for today's episode comes from Nutrifol. Did you know that hair thinning will happen to about 1 in 2 women? Yeah, around 50% of women. Thankfully, Nutrifol helps women address it from within with science-backed supplements. Nutrifol targets root causes of thinning, which can range from stress and hormones to environment and nutrition to metabolism and more. Well, in a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after taking Nutrifol Women's Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months. I actually started Nutrifol postpartum when I noticed changes in my hair after giving birth, and I was so thrilled to find a solution that I felt comfortable taking in that first year postpartum and that actually worked for me. And I've now switched to Nutrifol Women just to continue to support my hair health. So take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrifol is offering the Newsworthy listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrifol.com and enter the promo code Newsworthy. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrifol for healthier hair. Nutrifol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code Newsworthy. That's Nutrifol.com with the promo code Newsworthy. New technology might make it easier to identify autism in children as young as 16 months old, and it could be just as accurate as a specialist. The American Medical Association published 2 studies about it this week. It's a device that follows kids' eye movements as they watch a short video showing 2 other children interacting with each other. Apparently, neurotypical children can focus on that interaction, like facial expressions and hand gestures, while toddlers with autism tend to gaze at other spots in the video. In trials, hundreds of children were first tested with the device, then evaluated by specialists, and both studies found the diagnoses were almost the same. The FDA has already approved the device for specialists to use, but researchers are hoping it might be able to be used by pediatricians and primary care doctors as well to screen even more kids, especially since the highly trained experts are in short supply and there are long waiting lists at specialty centers. Some autism researchers say it will always be important to take into account what a child's family and doctors can observe in the child, no matter how good technology gets. But they do say the idea of a tool that's objective is an exciting development, and more research is now underway. A busy week of traveling hit a snag yesterday when United Airlines asked the FAA to ground all of its flights. Any early afternoon United flights that weren't already in the air were impacted. But thankfully, the issues did not last too long. About an hour and 15 minutes later, the ground stop was lifted. United says the issue was a software update that caused a widespread slowdown in the airline's system, and flights weren't able to connect to dispatch normally. In the end, just a handful of United flights had to be canceled, and about 18% of its flights were delayed. The airline says it's still looking into the problem, but made it clear it was not a cybersecurity issue. New York City's mayor is now promising to take action against the organizers of a popular electronic music festival. It's called Electric Zoo, and every day of the 3-day festival had some kind of issue. Day 1 was supposed to be on Friday, but it was canceled because of organizers saying they weren't able to get the stage set up in time. Then Saturday, the festival started 2 hours late, and some acts had to be canceled. And some people say they didn't get to see any of them since they were left waiting for up to 5 hours just to pick up their tickets from will call because the tickets and wristbands weren't mailed in time. Then on Sunday, gates closed early because organizers say the venue had reached capacity. But thousands of ticket holders were still outside, and viral videos show them rushing gates, hopping fences, and pushing their way in. All that said, a spokesperson for the festival told news outlets, quote, "The vast majority of Electric Zoo attendees had a great experience, and they promised to review the planning and execution ahead of next year." Still, Mayor Eric Adams says, quote, "It's unfortunate organizers wanted to turn our city into a zoo, and we were not going to let that happen. We will be dealing with them in the next few days." Oh, and speaking of festivals, thousands of people were still stuck in long lines of traffic trying to leave the Nevada desert yesterday after Burning Man. And there are still a few people left at the festival grounds today. Remember, a weekend of rain stranded people for days in foot-deep mud. And when it finally dried up enough for people to leave, traffic was extremely congested. At one point, it took drivers roughly 7 hours to go 5 miles to the nearest paved road. Vehicles got stuck and some were abandoned. Though, to be fair, even during normal years, Burning Man is known for its big traffic jams. And some people who went this year say learning to roll with mayhem is just part of the experience. The Rolling Stones are getting ready to release their first new album of all original music in nearly 20 years, and their first album since longtime drummer Charlie Watts died. There aren't a lot of details yet, though we do know the album will be called Hackney Diamonds. The Stones are set to officially launch the record during a special event this morning, happening in East London's Hackney district. There are rumors the album will feature guest stars like Paul McCartney, Stevie Wonder, and Lady Gaga. But again, nothing has been officially announced just yet. Today's event will be live streamed on YouTube starting at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Work Wednesday, when we break down one interesting career or work-related news story every Wednesday. But first, this podcast is sponsored by Trust and Will. As you may know, part of the reason I started this podcast was to help people feel informed, but not overwhelmed, and to feel prepared, but not scared or anxious. And I have that same idea in mind when I think about how to secure my family's future. I don't need to fear the future, but I do want to feel prepared. And with Trust and Will, I appreciate that we were able to create an estate plan to ensure our family is prepared and protected without having to spend a lot of time or money. Trust and Will has simplified the process of creating and managing a will or trust online, from finding out what's right for your family to finalizing documents with a notary. My husband and I recently crafted our will, and were pleasantly surprised at how simple it was, how quickly we were able to complete it, and that it guided us through things we may not have thought about on our own. And yet, plans start at just $159. So gain peace of mind today with Trust and Will. Get 10% off plus free shipping of your estate plan documents by visiting trustandwill.com/newsworthy. That's 10% off and free shipping at trustandwill.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to Work Wednesday. A new report shows the percentage of women in the workforce who have kids under 5 years old is now higher than it's ever been. The report is from the Brookings Institution, and researchers call the findings significant and unexpected. In June of this year, 70.4% of women with children under 5 were in the workforce, and that's a jump from a peak of 68.9% before the pandemic. And while that's still lower overall compared to other groups of women, like those with older or no kids, none of those other groups have rebounded beyond their pre-pandemic levels. Reports say the reasons for the jump in women in the workforce who have young children is not totally clear at this point, so more research is needed. But experts do point to remote work as likely playing a big role, both by allowing more parents to have flexibility on the job, and also the option to work from home may have actually led more families to decide to have babies. Well, thank you so much for listening today. We'll be back with another news roundup tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.